Welcome everybody to Avanti Women's free webinar series. March is Avanti Women's month of transition, and we are delighted to have guest speaker Lisa Durante talk about return to work after maternity leave. Our mission at Avanti Women is to support GTA women through all stages of personal and professional development. The knowledge and experience that Lisa shares will support both. We're recording this session as well, and you'll be able to view it in its entirety on Avanti Women YouTube channel. What you'll learn today: first, how to reduce the feelings of being overwhelmed on your first days and weeks back in the office, how to work smarter, not harder, at both home and at work, and that speaks to both the personal and professional development, and key communication strategies to curb the motherhood penalty. I think we all have a thought of what motherhood penalty means, but I'm looking forward to hearing what Lisa defines it as. And I'll introduce a little bit about Lisa. She's our guest speaker. There's a picture of her. She's 15 plus years in corporate communications, a specialist in change management, had her children, and became a consultant to working mothers as they transition through their careers. She can give us some more details about what her career path has been. She has a website, and I know that she has workshops, online courses. She has a great blog and all kinds of resources for you. And Lisa, I'm just going to turn the screen over to you so you can move through, and I'm hoping that you can give everybody a little bit more information about yourself and what drew you to this passion project. So if you're controlling the screens, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. And thank you for having me here tonight. Really excited to share, just a lot of the strategies that will help women get back to work after they are have completed their maternity leave. My passion with working moms really started the day I announced my very first pregnancy at work. I was working in the US at the time, and I had told my manager, and she was a senior person in the company. She actually retired a couple of weeks within my maternity leave. And she had been a mentor and a champion of mine for quite some time at that point. And so she knew that I was dedicated and driven to my career, yet when I told her that I was pregnant, she was completely shocked. Her first question, rather than saying congratulations or, that's great news, she said, "Are you coming back to work?" And I was shocked. And I didn't know, I didn't even have time to think about how I would respond. And so the only thing I said was, "Don't you know me?" And it felt like in that moment, she no longer did. And that was, the very first example of many of people who started to change the way they treated me or thought about me, even though my actions and the work that I was doing was all the same that it was before my announcement. And so that, it really started to get me that a lot of people are making assumptions just because I was a mother, rather than looking at me as the professional that I had been all this time. And so what anytime I, find something that puzzles me, I do a lot of research. And so what I've discovered is that this is called maternal bias. So it's one of the unconscious biases that are prevalent in the workforce. And it's one of the most limiting, simply because it affects so many women. And like Susie shared, my background is in change communication. So for a long time, I've helped people manage through changes, be it, big restructurings or layoffs or things of that nature. And so I know that communications, if you really control the narrative and you follow it up with actions, you can really influence people to shift their thinking and their actions and the decisions that they make. And so I kind of combine my passion for working moms with my background in communications, and that is how I've gotten here today. I think we can move to the next slide. That'd be great. Yeah, because, and there is this shift that is happening, but we are turning into someone else, but yet our culture is obsessed with getting back to, everything that we did before we had a baby. There's so many headlines that scream at us to how to get your pre-baby body back. And then we're always encouraged, especially the self-care industry is telling us to get back to the things that we love. But when we're parents, you know, if we can move to the next slide, there's really no going back, because like this quote says on the screen, I can't go back to yesterday because I was a different person then. And
Yeah,
so
that
we
one
need
really
to,
spoke to me.
did it? Yeah. Because it's just so true that we are just different. We're fundamentally different. There are physical, you know, scars to that, and then there's an actual human being who is taking up all of our time and has even, you know, shifted how we, you know, our priorities and things of that nature. Yeah, thanks. But while we can't go back, oh, there we go. So I wanted to start off, like I said, we have now a baby, a child, and because of that, you know, our life is different, our priorities are different. And so I wanted to kind of share strategies on how we can start that shift to our new career as a working mom. And it really starts with baby, because as moms, we just can't think of any other place to start other than with our child. And I'm sure you've heard this quote before, that it takes a whole village to raise a child. And a lot of women returning to work feel this great sense of guilt leaving their babies. And let me tell you, never, ever in the history of humankind have mothers alone taking care of their babies. It's just never been possible. And they've never done it with just their partner. You know, if we look back at history, women have always relied on their communities, and that could be family members, but it could also just be neighbors and others in their community to raise their children. But today we have this idea that what's best for baby is mother alone. And then that kind of puts this shame and this guilt on us for having to leave our child. So I just want to reassure everyone that it's okay to leave our child so that we can go to work, so that we can provide for them and the rest of our family. So how do we transition them to their new care? Because if you have been their sole caregiver since their birth, this is going to be a bit of a change for them. Yeah, so it's going to be a bit of a change for them. And a lot of change comes uncertainty for your baby. So really, like, how are we going to adapt them to their new schedule and their new situation? So before we get into a little bit more on those strategies, I did want to just stop and ask, you know, what people are doing for care for their baby when they do return to work. If it's nanny, if it's daycare, or maybe a family member is taking care of them.
Yeah, and I told Lisa beforehand I was really fortunate that I had my mother take care of both of my kids. But that wasn't the case for a lot of people that I know. They went to nanny services and also daycare, which was really a struggle for a lot of people because daycare wasn't really readily available for 6 to 12-month-old babies. When I had my kids, that's when you went back from maternity leave. So I think it's a real tough one. I really lucked out with a family member. But I'll be curious as to say what most people are looking at, Lisa.
It's the majority is either nanny situation or daycare. Those are the two, depending on what time, what age moms are going back. So how old their baby is when they go back will depend on which one they choose. The younger the child is, it's likely more a nanny, because a lot of daycares, especially in the GTA, the availability is for when they're a bit older.
Yeah, absolutely. To the next slide.
Yes, please. Yeah. So how can we adjust baby's schedule? Because why, when I say adjust their schedule, what we're looking for is really adjust it to what it will be once you're back at work. So the very first thing to get started is to map out your new schedule. What's that going to look like? What are your days going to look like? And how are your days going to impact your child? So for example, if you need to leave the house at a certain time and you are going to daycare, what time do you have to have your baby up? What time is his first feed, and all of that? And so you're going to go ahead and as you map it out, you're going to look for the differences. What are the changes that are going to affect your child? And from there, you want to slowly introduce those changes. And it's everything. There's questions up on the screen here. It's everything from, times they go to bed and wake up. It's nap schedules. It's also feeding schedules and even routines. anything that you can anticipate, start to gradually bring it in to baby's life and start putting them onto that schedule, so that when it is time to go back and it is time to follow this new schedule, they're not, it's not all happening at the same time for them, which can impact their sleep and all of the other stuff. We can move to the next. Yeah, so the next one, so we're really looking, as I was saying, you want to do it gradually, and you really want to start slowly. The earlier that you can start these changes, the better. The better for you, the better for baby. Plus, everybody kind of gets to adjust to the new patterns. But it's not just your baby that you want to introduce changes to. You also want to introduce changes for yourself. And looking for what are the biggest changes that are going to affect your life. Perhaps the biggest stressor for new moms, and Susie, you hit upon it just a moment ago, is leaving your child, especially if it's not with a family member. There's just there's just so much emotion in doing that. And I can think back to my first time doing that, well, even the second time. It's just hard, no matter what, and no matter what age they are. Leaving them for the first time is just sometimes heart-wrenching. And so you want to make it less dramatic for yourself. So there's a few ways that you can do this. The first is to ask your partner to take off some time, and starting next year, the government has actually proposed expanded maternity and paternity leaves. And if fathers take off time, they actually get an additional 5 to 8 weeks. So that's something that could kind of get fathers to take more time off. And so why I'm suggesting that the partner takes off time is because they've had time to adjust to being a working parent while you were at home taking care of the home and of the baby, and they were able to do it without any stress or less stress. And so I believe that moms deserve the same thing, that they deserve that easier transition, knowing that there's someone at home without having to worry about either pickup times or, getting sick and all of the other stuff. If that's not possible, because I know that's still hard for a lot of families to be able to do that, the second idea strategy is to get your child into their new care provider a week or two before your return date. And this could be, a couple of hours a day, or it could be full time, whatever will work for you and your budget as well, especially if you're doing the daycare route. And it's just so that, you can kind of get through those emotions, freely cry your eyes out if that's what you got to do, without having to fix up your makeup or pull yourself together before you get into the office. This slide here shows a few other ways that you can gradually introduce some changes in your own area, in your own world. If we can move to the next slide, that'd be great. Yeah, before we move to the next point, I did have one more poll for everyone, and that's really a survey on what most modern couples argue about. What do we think that could be? Susie, do you have any ideas there?
It's not just, I think, is it housework? And then when your kids get older, you have a whole family arguing about housework. I would say that a lot of responses are coming in with the same. So are we right?
Okay.
Can I go to the next slide and
go
the big review?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
close.
Yeah, housework is now the third. Sex and money are the first, which I would argue that those two are worth arguing rather than housework. But today, and this survey, the study that provided this stat, they actually said this is the first time that they've seen housework so high up on the list. Usually it's much further down, and that is likely because, today's generation is working women is working more than previous generations. But what they did find in this study is that even moms who were the breadwinners, quote unquote, so they were earning more than their partners or they worked longer hours, they still took on 5 times the amount of housework than their partners.
Sad, and, but not surprising.
Yeah, it can be quite upsetting when I read things like that. But then, and so what you want to do is you really want to try to get your partner in on the housework. And if you do have to convince your partner to get involved, I just read another study. It came out of the University of Alberta that said that partners who are contributing to housework, they reported that they had more sex and they were more sexually satisfied than the ones that didn't. So, I'm just saying, maybe something that
do the housework, and then we only have to argue about money.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, next one. So I actually have a worksheet that I'd love to give out to anyone. You can just send an email over to info@lisadurante.com. and I'll send it over to you. And what it is, it really talks about is a guide on how you can have it all. And it works through, how to set new priorities as a working mom, as well as how to divide a lot of the stuff that is happening in the house. So it's everything from childcare to taking care of the home to, fixing the car, mowing the lawn, doing laundry, all of that. And how can you divide that up equally or more, because I don't believe in 50-50, but more in an equitable way that will allow everybody in the home to be able to do what is most important for them.
Yeah, it sounds like a great resource.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've had some really good feedback on it. Yeah, we can go to the next one. Yeah. Okay, so now I want to switch gears and move us away from the home, so from the mom and wife role or partner role, and really switch gears into and get us back into work mode. Because returning to work is a huge mental shift for us. We spend our days kind of knee deep in diapers and laundry and, toys and all of that stuff. And so we need to start building up our professional muscles. Just as you wouldn't want to run a marathon without putting in some time for training, the same is true for when you return to work. And some of it could be pretty simple, just making sure that your skills, or if you have any kind of technical certifications, that they're all up to date or renewed or whatever has to happen with them. You can also just kind of review the latest industry regulations or rules if that is pertinent to your job. But something that is probably relevant for the majority of us is really to brush up on the skills like conversation skills. I'm sure that in the last couple of months, all you've done is, either spoken to your baby or spoken about your baby. So you kind of want to get into how can I have a conversation again with adults about adult conversations. And one of the ways you can do that is to really brush up on your knowledge about the world, your industry, your company. Instead of the next time you are on your phone and looking for something to do, instead of checking Insta, just check your company's website and look at their press releases and what's been going on.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah. It's all about just building up that knowledge. And it also trains your brain to take in information again, which you may not be used to once we're on that leave.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm. So in addition to reading and building up your knowledge, another way to just practice basic conversation skills is to meet with people. And I am going to recommend 3 different conversations. The first is to, talk to your colleagues. And I have on the screen, I have some questions that you can ask them. And really the aim is to just meet with folks who you work with. You can call up the friendlies, and you could do it in person if you're able to leave your baby with a babysitter, or just give them a call and just take some time to find out what has happened during your absence. Have there been any personnel changes or any changes in the scope of your team, anything that you should be aware of before you walk into work, just so that you are armed with that information, so that you can make any decisions that you need to make beforehand. So for example, if there's been a complete restructuring and you may be in a job that you may not want, or the type of work has changed, you may want to take some time to think of what is your next step. We can move on to the next slide. Thank you. Yeah. So, and then the second conversation is with HR. This is very important, especially as you're returning to work. If you've been out, especially for around the year mark, you really want to kind of come up to speed on what's going on at work. Things like your security badge. Is that going to actually work on your first day? Because you're already going to be flustered and frustrated just getting out of the house, and there might be some emotions attached to your start of your day. The last thing you want is to get to your front desk and not be able to get into the building or get into the area where your desks are. The same is true for like login and email passwords. Like, did anything change? Are you still able to get into it? So just asking those basic questions can go a long way and prepare you for your first day. But while you're speaking to HR, take the time to find out everything and anything you can that is related to new parents. So, are there any company policies that you need to be aware of? How can you enroll your child in the benefits program? What support networks are there? And you also want to ask about just different programs that will offer you some flexibility, be it work mobility or flexible arrangements, because you just don't know how life is going to unfold for you, especially in the first several months. As you settle into being a working mom and having your child being taken care of either by a nanny or a daycare provider. So just having these in your back pocket could come in handy so that you can kind of pull them out when you need them, rather than when you're knee deep in all of that stress, having to then research what is available to you. So yeah, so if we can move to the next slide, that'd be great. Oh, I did have one more poll and I didn't realize it, but just wanted to know what you want to know before your first day in the office.
I always
wondered any pieces of information.
I always wondered about if your computer's still working the same way, or if you've got new software, because that can be so frustrating. We're so reliant on our computers. Or if you could get your laptop and take it home for a couple weeks so you become more familiar with it without having to sit at your desk waiting for, a week before your laptop is ready for you.
Yeah. And that's where I actually had an issue with my passwords. I went in the first day and I had taken my laptop home but hadn't signed into it for a while. And then I got into the office and all my passwords were wiped out. And so then I had to sit on the phone with IT for like 45 minutes or whatever it was. And it just wasn't a great start to my day. I just felt so behind already. Well,
especially if you want to feel productive. So it's a big transition for you and you want to feel productive. So if you're just sitting there waiting we're so reliant on computers these days that you feel like, oh my goodness, fumbling around on your first day isn't such a great professional start.
I know. Yeah, it isn't. It doesn't leave you feeling good and confident. So the third conversation is talking with your manager, and your manager is going to provide you with the information that's truly going to jumpstart your return. And I'm calling this the third conversation, but it's not the last conversation. I really encourage you to have multiple meetings with your manager before you head back into the office, but also in the first couple months of your return, and do it on a frequent basis so that you're just keeping those touch points alive. Even if you feel like it's not a valuable time for you and your manager, just even if it's a short 15-minute check-in point on how you're doing and what you think your priorities should be. And it's all about understanding those priorities, because when you do return back to work, you need to work smarter and not harder. Like, you no longer have time to stay till 8 o'clock that day just to get it all done. You have to get home. You want to get home. And so you just have to find shortcuts to get there. But meeting with your manager is also a great way to start planting the seeds that are going to help you curb some of the potential motherhood penalty that could be coming to you. Now, the motherhood penalty it's subtle. Sometimes it is very overt, but for the most part, it's very subtle. It's kind of underneath, under the carpet. It's kind of happening. So it could be simply, the pregnant, either the pregnant woman or the new mom on the team who is not chosen, to go to take on a client project because there's travel involved. And many times that decision is made without it actually checking in with the woman and saying, what is it that you want? And there are other things like promotions aren't happening, the pay gap. There's a lot of penalties that women face once they become mothers. So if you keep those lines of communication open, you can start really planting some of the seeds on what it is that you truly want. So first conversation with your manager, this is before you return to work. So it's before your first day in the office. I truly recommend that you get a babysitter and you have a face-to-face meeting outside of the office. If you go into the office, you may be interrupted by people just wanting to say hi because they haven't seen you in a while, and it can just shorten your time with your manager. Now, I have questions on the screen, and it's, again, some of these questions are the same as the ones that you asked your colleagues, but but it's also asking your manager about their priorities, what they value, where they think you can contribute when you return, and what are they going to measure you? So how are you going to be measured on your successes? You don't want to, especially for the very first one before you head into the office, you don't want to go too deep into these. Like, you don't want to drill your manager. You just kind of want to get a better sense of what's been going on and what's been going on with your manager and your team.
Yeah. Where do you see this fitting in with the company's performance plan? So do you think that it's smart before you go away on maternity leave to have a performance plan and then kind of use that as a touch point when you're coming back? Is that a good idea?
Oh, most definitely. I actually recommend that once you announce your pregnancy, that you reset your goals for the year. And then before heading off, you review them and, kind of do a performance evaluation with your manager and kind of go through, these are the things that I accomplished. And then you can have that conversation as well and say, well, I want to continue working on those things.
Right.
You really have to keep going back to your performance and talking about the value that you are bringing to the team.
Yeah, and since you have a benchmark, then you feel like it's an easier starting point, so you're not jumping in a 60-mile-an-hour race at 5 miles an hour.
Yeah, and many times it's also a good reminder for your manager who, if you've been gone for the full 12 months, he may have forgotten all the great things you did. He may remember a few things, or she. But this is just a good way to say, do you remember I was really great beforehand, and I'm going to be great again. I just need some support in these next few months as I.
That's terrific. So the next slide.
Yes, please. Yeah. So this is a great quote, and it's by Martin Luther King Jr. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. So in your first conversation with your manager, it is, like I said, I don't want you to go deep on those questions. I don't want you to go deep in any area, but you do want to kind of get a greater sense. But this is also a good time for you to, kind of say what is important to you. You may not want to use this time to really make any demands, but you do want to start talking about things that are important. So this could be something like, if you want to leave the office by a certain time so that you can do daycare pickup or feed your child dinner that night, you have to say those things. If you're planning on breastfeeding when you're back, you inform them that this is an important thing in your life and you're going to make it work, and how you will make it work. And this is also a good time, just what we were talking about, Susie, about the about your performance evaluation. This is a good time to bring that up as well. And if you have any specific goals that you want to move forward, so for example, if a promotion was on the table, before you announced your pregnancy, bring it up and say, I'm still interested in that. What is it that I now have to do to get there? And if you don't have any specific goals, it's also just good to give a general statement that, I am committed to my career and I want to keep doing the great work that I was doing beforehand. And I'm really looking for your support in doing that.
Well,
So really kind of,
I think one of the most powerful things is that you said I'm going to work at this and I'm going to make it work and I'm going to find a solution for it. So they matter to you, but you're not putting it in their lap like fix this. You're making a statement that these things matter to me and I'm going to find a way to make things work, which is really powerful. So you're kind of you're accomplishing two things in one statement, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it is a relationship. We can't expect our managers to do it for us, but at the same time, we need at least their understanding. So, for example, breastfeeding. If you're going to need time to pump several times a day, you're going to be away from your desk, and they need to be okay with that, knowing and trusting that you're going to pick up and keep getting the work done. You're just going to make it work.
Yeah, exactly. Make it work is the critical piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then, in addition to the things that are very important to you, these are just some other expectations that you can set with your manager. We were talking about schedule changes, career aspirations. You want to think shorter term because you just don't know how the next few months are going to roll out for you. So if you have anything that you wanted to do in the next 6 to 12 months, share those. But anything beyond that, just do a wait and see. Long-term career plans, maybe there's a promotion in the horizon, but you don't want to be too detailed because at this point you don't want to commit to anything. Transition times are not a good time to commit because sometimes women take on too much and then we end up drowning, and that's never a good one. Another thing to talk about and to set expectations is how you've been planning for smooth transition. So what is it that you've been doing? It can be everything from talking, I've been chatting with colleagues, I'm having this meeting, I want to make sure that things are going to go as smooth as possible. Depending on the dynamics with your manager, you may even want to ask them on where you think they need where you can get their support. So if there's anything there, just take the time to ask. Of course, you don't want to make demands, but if there's something that, I need you to be understanding that I am going to take these many breaks in a day to be able to pump, then have that conversation.
Right.
We can move to the next slide. Yeah. Okay. And the reason that you want to talk about these things, especially making the career statements and what is important to you, it goes back to what I talked about in the beginning with my manager. When I first announced my pregnancy was, what I've realized is I first took it, I was very sensitive, of course, and I took it as a personal, that she didn't know me, that there was something, what was going on in our relationship that she didn't understand. Did I not express my desire to grow my career? So I put the onus on myself. But what I realized, or what I've realized since in a lot of my research, is that we really don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And there's a lot of neuroscience that backs up maternal bias. And really what it comes down to is that, we create our biases all based on our own personal experiences, our personal ideas, what we've seen work, what we've seen that doesn't work. And, many times our brains actually short circuit things, and we are biased actually for our benefit, so that it makes things easier for us. But it starts to work against us when, someone else's ideas contradict with ours. And so, when so we want to make sure that we are very clear on what it is that we want, so that the other person, be it our manager, it could also be colleagues or clients or mentors, that they all understand where it is that we are coming from, and they can stop seeing things as they see them and start to appreciate, okay, this is their point of view. For this person, she doesn't want, to really have a relaxed transition in. She is the breadwinner to the family. She wants to keep growing her career. So really stating what it is that you need, so you can break down some of the stereotypes and the biases in the other person's mind. And in order to do that, I think we can move, nope, I think that might be, yeah, anyhow. So one way you can do that to really break down these biases is to meet with your manager. That's one, but it's also to really get clear on what are your priorities, what are your goals, and you know, you can go back to that slide that we had on the questions to ask, and you really want to start asking those questions more and more of your manager. So what, for example, what are the priorities? What value can I bring to the team? By asking those questions more and more, you can then say, then you will have a direct path on what it is you can do, and then you can go ahead and align your goals to those if they work for you. And if they don't, then it's talking to your manager and saying, I really want to go here with my career. How can we make that happen? So having those conversations over and over with your manager. I recommend that, you know, like I said, before you return, sit down with your manager. I also recommend a couple of weeks after you first return, just to kind of say, you know, I'm settling in, I have these questions. And then maybe at the 3-month mark, you want to sit down again and just say, you know, it's been a quarter, I've been back. How do you see things going for me? These are the issues that I'm having, and try to really keep the conversation going. Yeah, because, and the more you do that, the more you're going to get them on your side. And it's not just managers that you want to do this with. You also want to talk to others who may have influence over your career. And that could be mentors, but it could also just be other senior people in your organization, or anyone who may have an ear to those senior people that you kind of need in your corner. As long as you keep using your voice and you keep following it up with action. So if you say this is what you want, then you have to kind of show them that this is what you want. And then, you know, and then you can get others to support you. And this goes to, you know, when you have a manager support, it will also be easier, and they know that you're committed and you're willing to do your part in making things work. You also have, you're going to get more, it's more likely that you're going to get more leniency on their behalf. So, you know, telecommuting is a big one. A lot of companies do it, but they only give it to certain employees who have, quote unquote, proven themselves. So if you kind of show that you are trustworthy, I guess is the word, although I think all employees should be trustworthy, then they will allow you to take advantage of those other benefits and perks that the company offers. So yeah, so I think we can move to the next slide. Yeah, and so that leads us to any questions that there may be. And I know that a lot of folks don't always like to ask questions live, so you are more than welcome to send them to me via email or any of the channels that I have listed here.
Yeah, that's perfect. And when we post this, people can make note of this. And I'm sure that you have other sessions and workshops that people may want to attend and can follow you on the different social media. But I think you've raised some really amazing points. And when I first started talking with you, Lisa, I think my first, other than email and messaging back and forth, I think the first words I said to you is, I wish I had heard some of your advice before I went on maternity leave, because it just makes so much sense. And that last slide also rings really true, is that we have to understand that other people see what they see and we see what we see, and it's just the constant clarification to make sure that you're actually seeing the same picture, so that you're moving after. And it just a really interesting point to not take things personally. It really struck me when your personal story, that you could even hear it catch in your breath when you're doing the introduction here, that you said, "Don't you know me?" And it's such a big change. So I really appreciate all the wisdom that you've shared tonight, and we'll pass along this information. And as I said, I know that Lisa has a How to Have It All checklist that you can get from her if you email her at info@lisadurante.com, and she also has a website. So we'll close off the slide for the presentation for this evening, and thank you so much, Lisa, for all your expertise, and we look forward to perhaps attending another Avanti Women in-person workshop. We have career transition workshops that I'm sure there would be women who'd be very curious to hear your experience, especially because you have the change management background and the desire to do the research and figure things out and put a process. So that's what makes your knowledge so wonderful to share. So we'll sign off now, and thank you very much, and look for this recording on the YouTube channel, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.